Welcome to Module 2, Systems Thinking and Systems Change. Module 2 is the second of the theory modules. This module will explore how systems thinking can strengthen understanding and sense-making in complexity in order to support sustainable systems change. This toolkit is an effort to capture our learning from the early stage systems change initiative with the Fred Hollows Foundation. It is not an exhaustive exploration of the existing theories or concepts related to systems change, but an introduction to the prominent ones that informed our decision-making. It is hoped that making these underlying concepts explicit will be a first step towards a shared language within the organization that can be used to spark conversation in planning for the ways forward. The goals of Module 2 on systems thinking and systems change are first to define systems thinking, second, present some ways that system thinking can improve the response to population eye health, and third, describe systems change as it relates to sustainably improving population eye health. Systems thinking is a way of understanding and problem solving within complex systems, which is something we discussed in Module 1. This approach to thinking considers the interconnected and interdependent nature of all of the actors within a system. Within public health, it looks at health outcomes as a product of these dynamic relationships. Under this overarching definition of systems thinking, there are many further concepts. Briscoe et al. Present one helpful way of organizing 4 overall systems thinking elements. The first element is how the system is organized. This includes the rules within the system and the direction set for actors within the system through leadership. An important part of this is the boundary that we draw around the system that we're trying to understand. And this is something that we'll discuss further in Module 3. The second element includes the networks within the system, and that includes all of the actors, such as organizations, individuals, institutions, and other stakeholders. In addition to describing these networks, systems thinking includes consideration of how to manage and interact with them. Next are system dynamics. This includes the ways we model and understand the interactions and dynamic changes within the boundaries of our target system. It is our attempt to understand how the organizing structures influence behavior and the health outcomes we're interested in. And fourth element is systems knowledge. This is how we manage the recording of explicit and implicit knowledge that is developed throughout this sense-making process. Additionally, this includes how the information flows to drive towards systems change and how it informs our decision-making. Combine the information presented on complex adaptive systems in Module 1 with these elements of systems thinking, which can help us understand these systems we want to intervene in. There's one important conclusion that has driven our work on this project, and that is that complex problems require dynamic solutions that arrive from the local system context. Interventions that aim to change how a complex system is functioning to improve health outcomes will be different from traditional approaches that emphasize single interventions with linear cause and effect expectations. These interventions will be multi-component, meaning that they will intervene at multiple points within a system, rather than an isolated subsection of that system. They'll also include mapping relationships between actors to understand these potential interactions and feedback loops that may be having impacts on different parts of the system. Again, really relying on that interconnected component of these systems. And last, they will be flexible enough to respond to feedback from the system, because if the elements of systems thinking are pushing towards an ongoing, developing understanding of the system, we really want our interventions to be flexible enough to incorporate that knowledge so that they become better over time as well. What does it mean when we say we want to work towards systems change? In this public health context, it means we are working to address these interconnected underlying causes of a health outcome, rather than only addressing the more apparent symptoms of these root causes. But this can be difficult because these root causes take effort to understand, as is evidenced by the systems thinking elements that are necessary to make sense of these interconnected influences. It's also made difficult by the nature of these complex adaptive systems, which are constantly changing. The delivery of a new service or intervention can easily lead to changes in the system because of the connections and networks that are being impacted. The difference will be in the behavior of the system when the service is stopped. If there has not been enough change across points in the system to sustain them, these temporary changes will not persist. To better understand what can be done to influence systems change, Kanya et al. Present a 6 conditions of systems change framework. This describes the conditions that work together to either reinforce a system's functioning or that can be targeted to create change. Many systems change efforts focus on explicit or structural changes at the top of the diagram. These include policies, practices, and resource flows. They can be within an organization or a government, and these are easier to define and measure because of their visibility. The relational and transformational change levels present a challenge to measurement and definition. However, despite this, these components are necessary to sustain systems change. For example, mental models are what we use to create narratives about interactions within the system. If decision makers, voters, leaders, or family members do not view health improvement of vulnerable populations as important, or view it as an individual failing rather than the outcome of multiple factors, then the success of a policy or funding stream will be threatened by poor implementation, buy-in, or support. Who stakeholders interact with and the nature of those connections, such as the quality of community engagement or power dynamics, such as the exclusion of diverse voices from decision-making, will have reverberating effects on the functioning of a system, just as changes from the status quo have potential to support a change in the system. One pervasive outcome of many systems of public health across the world are health inequities. When inequities arise from the existing system, it is because the system functions in a way that sustains these disparities. So efforts to change the system must take these many forces maintaining these patterns into account to change these outcomes and improve health for all. This work requires the shifting of power structures, and this can be very difficult and often trigger resistance. However, for many of the reasons outlined in this module and in future modules, there are tools and techniques to approach this change, and due to the nature of the complexity that influences the health outcomes we want to improve, it's necessary for us to integrate as many of these techniques as possible to improve our response to the specific needs and characteristics of the complex environments we work in. Hopefully, some of these concepts about systems thinking and systems change that we found relevant to our project have been interesting to you. If you'd like more information on some of the resources referenced in this module, you can find additional links and references on this slide. The module in this series is Module 3, Systems Dynamics. In this module, I'll present an overview of systems mapping and systems dynamics, an introduction to basic model components, and provide an example of how to capture hypotheses about systems dynamics to make assumptions and opportunities more explicit.